Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Goal Line Stand podcast. We are 3 more weeks until week 0. The countdown is on. College football is right around the corner. Me and Coby are here to talk Big Ten football with you, a little conference realignment. First of all, Coby, how are you doing, man? How's coaching football going for you?
Oh, doing good. For those of you that don't know, I just got hired as a teacher and football coach at Warner Robins High School down in Middle Georgia. It's awesome, man. I graduated from there. Feels so good to be back. Got our first scrimmage tomorrow against Veterans High School, and a very notable Georgia Tech prospect, wide receiver Isaiah Canyon, will be in play. So for Jackson's sake, I'm going to keep all the notes I can and update him on how he's doing.
And just like every Georgia Tech fan that follows, and I've written about it, kid's a stud. Kid is going to be a stud. And that was a big time commitment this summer, excuse me. For me, football's been back, but in a different way. Fall camp started for Georgia Tech this week. Got to talk to Brent Key on Tuesday. Got to talk to Buster Faulkner yesterday. Man, it was nice to see the Yellow Jackets out back and practicing. You know, the best quote of the week I asked Brent Key myself, what he thought about them being picked to finish 12th in the ACC preseason poll. He just looked me dead in the eye and said, I could care less. So there you go. They do not care about that stuff. And I've been covering all that stuff. There's going to be more for today and the rest of the week. Go check it out at allyellowjackets.com. Best place to get Georgia Tech news. Go follow it there. But it's time to talk Big Ten football. Yeah. Big Ten has been in the news because they could be getting a little bit bigger. Something we're just going to touch on here for a second. Nothing has happened as of the time that we have this out right now, but Oregon, Washington could be new additions to the Big Ten. That's been kind of the rumor. Arizona, Utah, Arizona State could be heading to the Big 12. Everything's crazy. We're not going to spend a ton of time on it because we have talked about this a lot over the past few weeks. It just seems like everything as we, have known it for a while is kind of crumbling around us and things are changing rapidly. You got any thoughts on that or anything new?
It's going to be crazy. I'm going to hit you with a question. I actually saw it on Twitter. Would you take college football for what it's going to be in the year 2027, or would you flash back to the year 2007? Would you prefer college football to be like it was in that era? What do you prefer?
I saw the great philosopher Josh Pate put that question up this morning. Yeah. I was thinking about it a lot today, as one does naturally. If you take away the BCS and just had the playoff, I'll take 2007 all day. Like I'm just with all this conference realignment stuff, and I'm not going
to transfer portal, all of it is too much.
Well, NIL and transfer portal doesn't bother me so much, but it's just like I'm gonna if Oregon does leave, I'm gonna miss seeing Oregon State. I'm gonna miss seeing Oklahoma State Bedlam. Like those are. There's a saying, Oklahoma wins Bedlam by a little or they win it by a lot. But they were some fun games. Like, they were always fun and entertaining games. And just seeing some of these rivalries split up. Florida State, they threw performance press conference yesterday, for lack of a better term. If they leave to go to the Big Ten and Miami doesn't join them, you're talking about losing one of the greatest rivalries we've ever had. It hasn't been that way in a few years, but I don't know. Like, that's why I would say 2007.
I just lose the tradition of the game. The way college football is moving forward right now, tradition is changing. We are old school cats. We grew up watching this game. Years like 2007, that BCS era, that was our golden era. We grew up on that. The way college football is moving forward now, just seems like we're losing out on a lot of stuff that made us love the game,
Yeah, and we sound like just old people talking, like our traditions are falling around us. Everything's changing, but it's hard, but we're gonna move on to our preview. But there's all sorts of realignment news going on. I don't know how it's going to affect. The ACC is a mess right now. The Pac-12 might not exist.
Integrating in front of our very eyes.
This week it might not even exist anymore. So, just a lot of crazy stuff happening in college football. But every conference preview we've done so far, ACC and SEC. ACC doesn't have divisions anymore. Big Ten is one of the this is the last conference we're going to talk about that actually has divisions. So we've already talked to SEC. Now it's time for the Big Ten. I guess as we get into it, we always start with a big question we had, and we touched on this in a pod of ours previously. We talked about, what we were just saying, the old days of college football. I'll take you back to 2008. One of my favorite seasons, there was a 3-way tie in the old Big 12 South, which, doesn't exist anymore. Texas, Oklahoma, Texas Tech, all finished 11-1, all beat each other up. It was Oklahoma got the edge to go to the Big 12 title game because they were the highest ranked team. I think we're looking at something similar in the Big Ten East. Like Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, to me, are all teams that can win the Big Ten and win a national championship. And I know that may be a hot take to some throwing Penn State in there, but as you're going to see, I'm really high on this team.
Yeah.
I have been since February. Like
Yeah.
I've been talking about, like 2023 is the year for Penn State. Like this is what
I'm pretty sure you said it in last year's preview.
I think
2022, 2023 Penn State, not the one you want to watch out for. That 2023, 2024 Penn State, that's the one you want to watch out for.
Once we get Sean Clifford moved along to the Green Bay Packers, it's time to get serious. Like it's time to move on.
Clifford, baby.
You know what? Just on an off-topic point, I was shocked he was drafted. Fifth round, was it?
A big quarterback, a lot of experience. I mean, I think he's better than Jacob Eason. And Jacob Eason got drafted, third round, something like that.
We can't get on that tangent. But as I was saying, like there's a legitimate chance these three teams beat each other up. Like, Michigan could go on the road, lose to Penn State. Penn State could go on the road, lose to Columbus. Ohio State could go on the road and lose to Michigan. It's crazy. You could be sitting there at 11-1 and have a three Big Ten teams that could sit there and say they're possibly worthy of playoff contention. I'm anxious to see if Penn State has to live up to that hype. Michigan has to just keep doing what they're doing, like they've been plowing through the Big Ten for 2 straight years. And then for Ohio State, it's replacing C.J. Stroud, replacing two NFL caliber offensive tackles. It's I'm interested to see, and then we'll get to the rest of the teams, but it really does look like not just a 3-way race in the Big Ten East, but in the Big Ten overall. The floor is yours. What is your big question for the Big Ten?
My big question is, with quarterback changes at Ohio State, what makes everyone so sure they beat Michigan? I mean, they lost to Michigan 2 years in a row on the road and at home with second overall pick C.J. Stroud. They still had that stable of wide receivers, Marvin Harrison, Jackson Smith-Njigba. They had a stable of running backs with Travion Henderson. And their defense, they got potential defense players of the year in the Big Ten. They still couldn't get it done against Jim Harbaugh in Michigan the last 2 years. Now, granted, you still got a lot of those same top-notch players, guys that are going to be potential first-round draft picks, top 10 picks, everything, and a bag of chips. What makes you so sure they beat Michigan whenever we don't even know if their quarterback is going to be better than what they've had the last 2 years? It seems kind of premature to just assume that, it's Ohio State, roster, everything, they're going to beat Michigan this year. I got faith in Jim Harbaugh. I really do. If you would have asked me that 3 years ago, I would have thought he was out the door to the NFL, but he has turned that program around. Given enough time, now they're the top-notch dogs of the Big Ten. I think they remain there. They don't have any questions at quarterback. They know who their guy is. They definitely don't have questions at running back. They know who their guys are. And their defense is very formidable, and they've given Ohio State, even though they have those stable of athletic guys, they've given Ohio State problems the last 2 years. What makes everybody so sure that Ohio State will beat Michigan this year?
I'm not sure of it. And, when Ryan Day took over and, Dwayne Haskins left, who set records, he was a Heisman finalist there. Justin Fields come in. All the reports were saying, all the intel, Justin Fields was really good. He's going to be an elite high-level quarterback, and he was. When he left, everybody just said, hey, it's C.J. Stroud. Like, we know who it's going to be. We know what level of play to expect, and it was the same. C.J. Stroud played at a very high level, was a second overall pick in the draft this year. Mm-hmm. Now you're reading, like, not that they're bad, but it's like, yeah, Kyle McCord, he's fine. Devin Brown could beat him out, and he's fine. They got good talent around him, but does Ohio State have a difference maker there? That's going to be what really is going to either propel them to the playoff or possibly finish third in this division. They could have the worst quarterback situation out of the 3 teams we're talking about, Michigan and Penn State. Like, we know what Michigan has. Penn State thinks they have a superstar, and they might. So I don't know.
It's kind of. I'm gonna sneak this in real quick. It's kind of like the same questions you got at Alabama. To be honest with you, the last 3 years at both schools, you've had Heisman contenders at quarterback. Now moving into this year, you got quarterback battles in fall camp. You still got one of the most talented rosters in the country. But if Alabama or Ohio State, if they don't figure out that quarterback spot, it can kind of put a damper on their season.
Yeah, and I think where I'll split the differences is like I know Ryan Day can coach a good offense. Now, is it going to be the same level as past couple of years? I don't know, but where I have concern with Alabama is their quarterbacks are they went out and got another one. Tommy Reese is. We don't know if the offense is going to play at a certain. The floor and ceiling to me is different with them, but
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
I'm more certain like Alabama's going to be a lead on defense. I don't know if Ohio State is. They got good talent,
yeah.
but it is similar, but. So we're going to dig into those teams in a little bit, but let's talk about our favorite conference and non-conference games. And I'm going to start us off here going with the non-conference slate. It was honestly a little hard because, the Big Ten does play a 9-game conference schedule. So when you're looking, you're like, you got 3 games to choose from. Obviously, some teams are going to play some cupcakes. So finding 5 really good non-conference games was a little tough. But I'm going to start with Washington and Michigan State. This game – it's in East Lansing this year. It was a lot more hyped last year. And the thing is, the script was kind of flipped. Michigan State was the ranked team. We didn't know what the heck Washington was going to be with Michael Penix. Kalen DeBoer was in his first year. That was kind of the first sign like, oh, Washington might be kind of good because that game, the final score got a little closer. Washington spanked them up there. Like that game was not close. I'm kind of interested to see where both teams are at, because Washington, they're going to have a lot of hype on them to possibly win the Pac-12 and be a dark horse playoff team. Michigan State's in a mess right now. Like
Man, as soon as Mel Tucker got his money, it seems like they have just fallen off. I don't know what to make of Michigan State. I really don't.
You mean as soon as Kenneth Walker got Mel Tucker that money, and then because think about it, I can't really judge him off that one weird year he had at Colorado because he was just starting to build things. And even the COVID year, his first year at Michigan State, because, he was hired in like late February, early March, because Mark D'Antonio just said, all right, I'm out at the end of February. And then as soon as Mel Tucker gets hired, COVID. So that was the weird transition, but he's had one good year as a head coach. So I don't know. That to me is going to tell us a lot about where both teams are. Maybe Washington is for real. Maybe Michigan State's on a downward trajectory, but did that make your top 5?
Actually, I had that sitting right there at number 2, simply because I got high hopes for Washington, man. For all we know, it could be their last year in the Pac-12. They're going to make some shake. They got the quarterback, they got the receivers, they got the offense. They were top 3 in offensive production last year. They're that good. Michigan State, they got to bounce back. They got to get back to that old school Michigan State style defense. Mel Tucker has to get those boys coached up on the offense side of the ball. I think that's going to be a make or break game for Michigan State.
Future conference game, right?
Yep.
Well, I'll go to my number 4 game, and it's a little bit of a weird pick, but it got the primetime slot, I think, in week 3, maybe, or week 2 or 3. Washington State versus Wisconsin. Washington State went to Madison last year and beat them. And it was one of their biggest wins this season. Jake Dicker is in his second season. But I think this is the first game that, we'll really get to see Luke Fickell against a pretty decent opponent. Obviously, Fickell coming in, took Cincinnati to the playoff. They won a lot of games last year as well. He's been a really good coach ever since then. And, getting Phil Longo from North Carolina, it's going to be a little bit of a departure from what Wisconsin's been doing. So that's going to be our first real test to see them. And going on the road like that, that's a tough environment to play in over in Washington State. And Washington State had a sneaky good defense last year. I don't know if that made your list, but I'm really intrigued by that game.
Oh, I had that right there at number 4 on my list. Listen, I'm very high on Wisconsin this year. They're kind of one of those teams where they seem to trend the same way each year. They're going to run it heavy. They're going to have a defense that's going to stop and control the tempo of the game. But with that being said, they got a workhorse in Braylon Allen at running back. I think they can go to Washington State, and I think they can win that game.
Just moving on to number 3. This game's going to get a lot of hype and attention. Nebraska and Colorado. Old Big 12 game. It's just going to be if Colorado, they will have already played TCU, we'll kind of get a feel of what they are, or we'll have one glimpse of what they are or could be. Nebraska, former Yellow Jacket Jeff Sims stepping in at quarterback there. Matt Rule. There's a lot of intrigue around that game.
There's a lot of hype around Matt Rule right now.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll have to see. It's Nebraska. You never know.
Yeah, and I think Matt Rule will work out fine there. I just like this year, I don't know. Maybe they make a bowl game, maybe they don't. But it'll be interesting. I like the old Big 12 feel of it.
I didn't have them in my top five. Definitely an honorable mention. That's going to be a fun game. A game I did have in my top five. I got Minnesota and North Carolina.
That was my
You
number
got
two.
a team that cannot put points up, but they can stop just about anybody. You got a team that can score on anybody, but they cannot stop a cold in the winter. It's not happening. I think that's going to be a very fun game. You got a really good defense. You got a really good offense. I think Drake May, he's really going to see a big boy defense, and I think he's going to have to prove why he's one of the best players in the country. But Minnesota, that could be a big win for them if they want to get back into the conversation of the Big Ten.
The nation's 115th ranked passing game meets one of the worst defenses in the country. Unstoppable force and immovable object. I had that as number 2 on my list. I don't remember that series ever getting scheduled. It's just kind of like Minnesota playing in Chapel Hill is going to be kind of weird. I don't know, but it's a fun game. I think we talked about this on last year's pod. Minnesota has been really good on defense. Like everybody thinks PJ Fleck is this offensive coach. They had the nation's number 8 total defense and number 4 scoring defense last year.
Yeah,
And
they're
you can
good.
call that fluke or whatever. They're a very good defensive football team. They
Yep.
got to find a way to throw the ball. Like they've got to. But that wraps up a tough September for North Carolina because, like we talked about, they got South Carolina, Minnesota, App State, and Pitt in September. So have fun with that. Number 1, I think, is obvious. Ohio State at Notre Dame.
Yep.
This game, me and you, it was one of the more hype games last year. I know me and you kind of talked it down because we had very high expectations for Ohio State. The game was kind of
it wasn't a blowout at all.
Yeah, but at no point did you ever think Notre Dame was going to win.
Yeah,
because they couldn't move the ball. Like Tyler Buchner was out there struggling for his life.
Hey,
and
don't talk about Tyler Buchner, please. Don't do it.
that version of Tyler Buchner, not the new version, not the new version.
Don't diminish my hopes.
And you knew at some point, like the explosion or the long explosive play was coming. And to Notre Dame's credit, their defense actually did.
Their defense played a decent game. They held out as long as they could.
Now we get Sam Hartman. Notre Dame could, like, it's totally
upgraded that quarterback now.
Notre Dame can have an advantage at quarterback against Ohio State, which is weird. And the game's in South Bend. Like, that's going to be the first true test for the new Ohio State quarterback and offensive line. So I don't know if you got any more to add. I'm sure it was number 1 on your list as well.
Oh, definitely number 1. I mean, I think you hit all the points. I had to slide one more game in there, though. America's team, baby. Give me Kansas versus Illinois. Illinois, they got some NFL dudes on that team, man. Illinois might be something serious. Kansas, they're on the rise right now. They had the best season they've had in years last year. I think they have an even better season this year. That's going to be an entertaining game. That's definitely one I'm going to have on TV all day.
That's Kansas's offense versus Illinois' defense. That to me, that's a good little chess match because Kansas is going to have a very, very fun offense. Illinois, like they've got like 2 or 3 guys on their defensive line that will play in the NFL. They really do. They're good. But let's go to the conference games. We'll just kind of run through these quickly because we're going to get into each team here in just a second. My number 5 is Penn State at Iowa, or Penn State versus Iowa. It's in Happy Valley, but like this is going to be a big test for Penn State early. Like I don't really buy into like West Virginia or somebody else testing them before this game. It's a primetime game too, and it's on CBS. This is one of those first Big Ten games on CBS. So I'm excited to see Penn State at Iowa. Did that make it for you?
Yep, that was right there at number 4. I completely agree with you. I think that's going to be a very fun game. You get to see Drew Allar against a defense that's pretty formidable, if we're being honest with you. I don't think Iowa has the offense to keep up with Penn State, so we'll see what the final score of that is. At my number 5, though, I did have Wisconsin versus Ohio State. We don't know what Ohio State is going to be with that new quarterback. Also, they got a couple of dudes on that defense. They got a couple key players on the defensive line and at that linebacker spot. But like I said earlier, they're going to have their hands full with Braylon Allen. If they can control the tempo of that game, if they can keep that stable of Ohio State wide receivers off the field, I think Wisconsin might have a chance.
That game didn't make it for me, but one note I had on it, it's right after they play Penn State.
Ohio
State. And they got to go on the road to play this game. So that's interesting. If they are coming off a loss, they have to go win that game. But for my number 4, I had Iowa, Wisconsin. Yes, I'm throwing Iowa in there again. But to me, this is the Big Ten West Championship. Whoever wins this game, I think there's a good chance that they go on to Indianapolis and play it in the Big Ten title game. Like it's been one of the better matchups in the conference for at least as far as the division goes in the past few years. But Purdue won it last year. Iowa won it the year before, and Wisconsin. They used to run the Big Ten West. They're trying to get back to that on the Fickle. So, can they beat Iowa to do it? We'll see.
Yep, I didn't have that game in my top five. Definitely honorable mention. That's going to be one I keep on the TV watching. I already said Penn State and Iowa is my number 4 game. I'll move on to number 3. Give me Michigan, Penn State. Like Jackson said, there could be a 3-way tie. They're really good. Listen, if Penn State wins this game, that will be huge for them. That will give them a lot of leeway. I got a bad feeling that we're going to end up seeing 2 Big Ten teams in this college football playoffs. Penn State and Michigan could be both of them.
Yeah, that's interesting. We'll come back to that later. But number 3, I had Penn State, Ohio State, just kind of flipping around. We're probably going to get into a little bit of a round robin here. They got to go on the road to Columbus and beat them. They have not beaten Ohio State since 2016. They've come dang close a few times, but James Franklin's he's got to get back over that hump. Like they got to go get
Franklin has to get it done this year. He has to.
Like they really got to get it done, and they could have the quarterback advantage in this game. They probably will have the offensive line advantage in this game. Like it's rare.
Don't sleep now. Nick Singleton might be just as good a run back as Travion
That's
Henderson.
what I'm saying. To me, this game just has so much intrigue, and I like. I talked about the Iowa game, but I like Penn State's chances to be undefeated by this time. But number 2, this may be controversial. I'm gonna have Michigan, Ohio State. The only reason I don't have it number 1 is because I don't think Ohio State's one of the 2 best teams in the Big Ten. That's where you just talked about the number 1 game to me in the Big Ten this year. I know you just talked about it. To me, it's Michigan, Penn State. They're the 2 best teams in the conference. But if both of these teams were to be 10-1, or one of them's undefeated, one of them has a loss, and one of those, Ryan Day, it's weird because he's entering this year. He's 42-6.
Yeah.
And yet, after that Michigan loss last year, there was Ohio State fans that wanted him on the hot seat, and that's a real thing. Like they're tired of losing to Michigan. They're tired of not being in the Big Ten championship, and then they almost got to the national championship after almost beating Georgia, narrowly losing in that one. So that's where I have that game. Do you got any more thoughts on the game, or are you ready to move on?
I got Ohio State and Michigan as my number 1 game. That will majority of the time be my number 1 game in the Big Ten. Listen, that's one of the biggest rivalry in all of sports. They got 2 of the best teams in the country this year. I like that as number 1 game. As the number 2 game, I think you said it best, Penn State versus Ohio State. That is going to be huge. Penn State has the quarterback advantage. I have full confidence in saying that. I also think they have the defense. They got a top-tier corner. They got one of the best defensive fronts we're ever going to see at Penn State. I think James Franklin finally has the roster that can compete very well with Ohio State.
Yep, and we're about to dig into each of these 2 teams. We're going to start over in the Big Ten West. One of it's been made fun of a lot. It's almost like the ACC Coastal or the old Pac-12 South. But this is the last time we get these divisions, and we'll start my number 7 team in the Big Ten West. I don't think there's much debate here. I don't know if you got a different one. Northwestern over under win total at 3.5. I'm not going to get into all of what's going on. We've talked about it before. Pat Fitzgerald is out. There's a lot going on in Northwestern. They start the year off at Rutgers, then UTEP at home, at Duke, Minnesota at home, Penn State at home, Howard, bye week at Nebraska, Maryland at home, Iowa and Chicago, at Wisconsin, Purdue, and at Illinois. I'm just going to tell you right now, this is an under. This is an easy under. Maybe they beat UTEP. They'll beat Howard. Like that's 2, but can you find 2 more wins on there to get to 4?
Maybe Duke.
No, not for me. I'm lower on Duke than most, but to me, this is just they lost one of their highest rated recruit to Ohio State recently in a transfer portal. So I don't know how this team is going to be focused going into the year. I don't want to pile on them anymore, but I just think they're going to finish last in the Big Ten West.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, what's understood doesn't need to be explained. I think they do finish last. When Northwestern won the Big Ten West back in 2020, they have gone 2-16 in conference games ever since. I got no faith in them.
The weird thing is the year before they only had 1 or 2 wins too. So they've kind of, outside of the COVID year, they've kind of been on a downward slide pretty much since they won the Big Ten West. I think 2017 when they played Ohio State and Dwayne Haskins in that Big Ten title game. But I don't know if you got any more to add on Northwestern. It's tough out there, but
I'm good.
for number 6 for me, I'll lead this one off. It's weird because they were just in the Big Ten championship, but to me, it's Purdue. Brand new head coach and Ryan Walters coming over. He was the defense coordinator at Illinois. Graham Harrell, who's been the offensive coordinator for USC, West Virginia. They're kind of, Purdue has been one of the few Big Ten, or maybe the only Big Ten West team that has really thrown the ball around and kind of the term air raid is used too loosely nowadays, but Purdue's been one of the few Big Ten teams that does throw the ball around, so they're going to continue that. Texas transfer Hudson Card is coming in, but you lose star wide receiver Charlie Jones. He was really good last year. He was a very underrated player in the country, and they play a really, really tough schedule. So they start with Fresno State at home. That's a losable game. At Virginia Tech, I know me and you are both down on the Hokies, but like going to Blacksburg is not easy.
Yeah.
Syracuse at home, Wisconsin at home, Illinois at home, at Iowa, Ohio State at home, bye week, at Nebraska, at Michigan, Minnesota, at Northwestern, Indiana. Over under is set at 5.5. When I look at the schedule, like to me, Northwestern and Indiana are the only games I can pretty comfortably say they'll win. They'll probably be favored against Fresno State and maybe against Syracuse, but it's just tough for me to find 6 wins on that schedule. Give me the under.
Give me the over. It's a flip of a coin for me. While I do think they could probably end up 5-7 realistically, I think maybe they can win a game because we said it last year. I've said it a lot of years in the past. Purdue is just a team you really don't want to play. They can upset a lot of teams. Like they're just known to do that, but they can't win the games they're supposed to. I think they can go 6-6. I think that's like a more likely possibility than them going like 4-8 or something like that. Realistically, 5-7. I think Purdue can get that over though.
The only thing is we just don't know what kind of a coach Walters is, and they're losing their like Aiden O'Connell was a good quarterback. He got drafted. He put up numbers there and was a good player. Like I said, Charlie Jones was a really good wideout. You're losing all that on top of the uncertainty on some of the coaching hires. I won't say the uncertainty of the hires, but we just don't know how good they are yet. So, in a really tough schedule, it's going to be tough. But they could.
Yep.
Where were they for you? Were they at number 6, or where did you have them?
Oh no, they were definitely number 6. I can't see them finishing any higher than 6.
You just had them above Northwestern.
I think we talked about it for the show. I think our list is pretty much identical, except for who ends up winning the conference.
So number 5, I got Nebraska. They are also their over under is at 6.5. Nebraska gets talked about ad nauseum. Like it's like we said, Jeff Sims is there. I don't love the hire of Marcus Satterfield at offensive coordinator. I thought he really held South Carolina back. It's interesting when the play calling duties were kind of took away from him. All of a sudden, their offense starts exploding and they're beating Tennessee and Clemson. And then he was not fired, but you can take the job at Nebraska. So that's interesting, I think. And the schedule itself is interesting because, like I talked about, that Colorado game is going to be very. Nebraska's favored in that game, but I think that's more likely of a win for Colorado than TCU.
At Colorado.
Yeah, and you start off the year 4 weeks from tonight at Minnesota, and starting it off with a Big Ten West game already. Then you go at Colorado, Northern Illinois at home, Louisiana Tech at home, Michigan at home, at Illinois, bye week, Northwestern, Purdue, at Michigan State, Maryland, at Wisconsin, and Iowa.
Yep.
You only have to play one of the big 3 from the Big Ten East. Michigan game's a loss, but, they should beat Colorado to me. Northern Illinois should be a win. Louisiana Tech should be a win. Northwestern should be a win. I like them over Purdue, and they can get there. Like, at Illinois is tough, but I think they could beat Maryland or Michigan State. It's threading the needle a little bit, but give me the over on Nebraska. Actually, I can't believe I'm saying that, but looking at the way the schedule breaks down, I kind of like the way it sets up for them.
Nebraska, I can see them going bowling this year. I really can. For the first time since 2015, 2016, something like that. I can see them getting 6 games this year. They kind of under the radar, kind of loaded up, improved a little bit in a lot of areas through that transfer portal, especially at quarterback. You got former Georgia Tech guy, Jeff Sims. I think he can make some shake. You got wide receiver additions, defensive back additions. I think Matt Rule can get this team bowling in his first year.
I just kind of wonder what their offensive identity is going to be.
Yeah,
That to me is the biggest question on if they could maybe even win more than that. Because again, the schedule is not just brutal. Like, Michigan's the only certain loss I have on that schedule. But moving on for me, it was close between Nebraska and Minnesota for that 4-5 spot. I'm more certain Minnesota is going to give me really good defense. Over under set at 7. A lot of these Big Ten West teams right in here are pretty close together. Like we just said, Minnesota and Nebraska face off week one on Thursday night on Fox, 8:00 game. That's going to be an important game for both of those teams as far as conference finishing order in that division. Minnesota to me is a dark horse to win this division. We haven't seen them do that under PJ Fleck, but they've been close a couple times.
Yep.
The game against Nebraska at home, Eastern Michigan is a win at home. Got to go to North Carolina. I'm interested to see how that goes. I think they can win that game, but it's tough on the road against that offense. At Northwestern, Louisiana at home, Michigan bye week, at Iowa, Michigan State, Illinois, at Purdue, at Ohio State, Wisconsin. Those final 2 games, man, playing Ohio State and Wisconsin back-to-back is pretty tough. Man, over under, like – more than likely, I think they're 7-5 when all things are said and done. But if I had to make a bet on this, I'd probably go under. I just think 6-6 is probably more likely than 8-4. I just, winning 8 games against that schedule is pretty tough to me. I'm a slight under on that one. I don't know if you got any other thoughts on or any other big thoughts on Minnesota.
I think we got basically the same expectation. I think they can go 6-6. Give me the under. They did get a brutal draw from the Big Ten East this year with Michigan, Ohio State, and Michigan State. That's going to be brutal for them. I just don't know if they have the offense to back up the talent I think they can put out on defense. Over under is at 7, I think. Give me the under at 6-6.
It's one of the low key, one of the hardest schedules in the country right there.
Yeah,
it's really tough. Man, number 3 for me, and all the 4 teams we discussed, I can't realistically see any of them winning it. Sure, the Big Ten West is not exactly a strong division. You don't have a Georgia. You don't have a Michigan or Penn State in there. But it would surprise me if any of those 4 teams we talk – really 3 teams because Northwestern this year to me doesn't count. But, Illinois to me is a team I do think that can win this division. I almost said conference and slipped up there. Luke Altmaier coming in at quarterback, replacing Tommy DeVito. Those DBs to replace are tough, losing Devon Witherspoon. But we talked about this defensive line and, the schedule, it's not totally unfavorable to them, I think. And if the defense especially remains the same, like Toledo, at Kansas, Penn State's probably a loss, but Florida Atlantic, at Purdue, Nebraska, at Maryland, Wisconsin, at Minnesota, Indiana, at Iowa, Northwestern, you don't have to play Ohio State or Michigan. And, Penn State, they've had success against Penn State here and recently in the past. Nobody will ever forget that 8 or 9 overtime game. But I'm kind of optimistic on Illinois. Give me the over on 6.5.
Yeah, give me the over. I'm right there with you. Now, with that being said, the maximum ceiling for this team I see is probably 8-4. But realistically, I think they can go 7-5. However, they do have those road games against Kansas, Minnesota, Purdue, and Maryland. That's going to be tough in itself, but I think they can pull out 1 or 2 wins out of that for sure. I like where you got them ranked. I definitely agree with you. Give me the over on 6.5, but it is a slight over.
Yep. I think the schedule's favorable enough for them, though, but I'm interested to see how they replace some of those guys. Let's break down the top 2 teams. Both have a win total of 8.5. Wisconsin and Iowa. You used to say these are almost identical teams, man. They run the ball. They play good defense. They don't really throw that much. Wisconsin has a different look, though, with Luke Fickell coming in. Phil Longo was the offensive coordinator at North Carolina past few seasons. Had a lot of success with Drake May last year and with Sam Howell and those couple of years he was there. It's an interesting transition. Tanner Mordecai did not inspire a ton of confidence in me. I don't want to take a ton from spring games, but he threw, I think, 4 interceptions. Now, just because Phil Longo and Drake May and those guys threw the ball around a lot, I don't know that that's necessarily what Wisconsin's going to do. I still think, when they had Javonte Williams and Michael Carter at North Carolina, they did run the ball a fair amount.
Yep.
Braylon Allen is still getting his carries. Don't forget about that.
He is 30 catches a game, I promise you.
to me, the biggest question is, do they have the receivers to run this offense yet? Because the receivers Wisconsin's been recruiting, and I know they did have some nice additions in the portal, but they just haven't been recruiting for this kind of offense. So I just wonder if the receivers are going to line up right there and have success right away. Luke Fickell is going to have a well coached defense. I'm pretty certain of that. And their schedule breaks down nicely to start. Like Buffalo is a win. To me, that Washington State game is going to tell us a lot about whether Wisconsin can maybe be better than that 8.5 win total projection. But Georgia Southern at home, at Purdue, they have an early bye week, which kind of concerns me a little bit.
Yeah.
But then you get Iowa is at home, and we talked about how big that game is. Getting them at home is huge. At Illinois, Ohio State. Ohio State plays Penn State the week earlier, so keep that in mind.
Yep.
At Indiana, Northwestern, Nebraska, at Minnesota. I don't see them beating Ohio State. Every other game on that schedule is winnable to me. Give me the over, although I do think Iowa is going to win the division. Wisconsin's still going to be a pretty good team.
Yeah, with Wisconsin at 8.5, I think I'm going to take the over. The ceiling with this team, I think, really could be 10-2, perhaps. But realistically, I got them going 9-3. I think that's a little bit more likely than 8-4. Braylon Allen is going to be the bell cow for this team. However, they have a definite loss at Ohio State. I don't think they have quite the roster yet. But with Luke Fickell, he overhauled that entire roster. He got a couple key X factors in there. I think they can make some shake this year. Give me the over.
All right. We got to talk about one of our favorite teams to wrap this division up. Got to talk about those Hawkeyes. Number 2 scoring defense in the country, number 2 total defense, number 6 passing defense, number 11 rushing defense, and the 129th total offense in the country. And just to let y'all know, that's almost the worst in the country. This team has been – it's a joke offensively. Brian Ferentz did stay, but he got a big clause in his contract. I think most of you have seen he has to score 25 points a game this year to get bonuses. Or I think that's at least how it breaks down. So 25 points a game is a huge goal in Iowa. But in all seriousness, this team's going to be nasty on defense again. I know Jack Campbell was a first-round pick. It's just Kirk Ferentz has been there so long. Even when they lose a lot of guys, like they're just going to have an identity on defense. Like they're going to play physical. And there's not a lot of offenses they face where I'm just would be totally scared of more athleticism. Obviously, Penn State is a little bit of a worry, but other than that, they don't play Ohio State. They don't play Michigan. Like you get Utah State to open up the year. At Iowa State, they're in the news for all kinds of problems right now. They could have a lot of guys suspended for that game. Western Michigan at Penn State's probably a loss, but Michigan State, Purdue at home, I think they win those games. At Wisconsin, that probably decides the division. Minnesota, Northwestern neutral site, Rutgers, Illinois, at Nebraska. Give me the over 8.5. It does scare me. And we also got to mention Cade McNamara, probably going to be the starting quarterback there. He led Michigan to the playoff a couple years ago. So it's at least interesting. It's hard to put your full faith in Iowa to score points, but maybe they do. Give me the over on 8.5 though.
Give me the over, but it's very slight. I think they go about 9-3. They got a little bit of a tough road schedule. You got at Penn State, at Wisconsin, and at Nebraska. All three of those are very losable games for them. I think they do end up losing those games, but like you said, the rest of their schedule, they don't play Michigan. Outside of that, I think they can beat just about anybody on their schedule. I trust for some reason their defense to get them 8 wins on its own, but to pull off that 9th win, I think that could be huge for them.
Yep. So I got Iowa winning the West. You have Wisconsin?
I have Wisconsin.
All right. Well, let's move to break down the East, and I'll be brief here with the Indiana over under at 3.5. They, like we talked about with Northwestern, Indiana also had a really good COVID season, with Michael Penix Jr., Ty Freifogel at receiver. Like that, they played in a big bowl game. They almost beat Ohio State. They have struggled ever since, and I'm going under here. I like Tom Allen. I think he's done well there, but Indiana's a really hard place to win. There's just not a lot for me to get excited about. The quarterback situation and the defense is not very good, and the schedule's tough playing in the East against Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. Give me the under.
Yeah, give me the under. I see them only having 3 winnable games on this schedule, and that is Indiana State, Akron, and Rutgers. Outside of that, I don't see them winning any other game here.
To me, that's 2 wins and a toss up. Like, I just don't see 4 wins. Like, give me the under all day on that.
Yep.
Moving to Rutgers, their win total is set at around 4. Um, Defensively, they were pretty good last year, but they're almost like the inverse of Iowa. Like, they're decent defensively, but not elite. And then their offense, 126 total, 123rd passing, 123rd scoring. Like, it's really rough. The great Rutgers is a really tough job, but Greg Schiano's just not been able to get it going to the effect that he once had it. They did bring Kirk Soraka in to run the offense. That could give them a boost. He has had success at Minnesota and previously at Rutgers before, but
Yep.
just with questions at quarterback, and I don't love the skill positions. I'll say for the win total, I'll lean over because like Northwestern, they can win, Temple, they can win, Wagner, they can win, Indiana, they can win. That's 4 right there. And I don't think Virginia Tech in Rutgers is totally unwinnable. Like,
Yeah.
they're not going to go to a bowl game, I think, but getting to 5 wins, I think that's possible. I'll reluctantly pick the over for Rutgers.
Even though you got low expectations, you still got higher expectations than I do. Listen, I think they can only win about 3 games on their schedule as well. And I think that is the 3 non-conference games. I think that is Virginia Tech, Temple, and Wagner. I think 4 wins is honestly a stretch, and I think that 4th win would have to come from Indiana, but they're playing at Indiana. So give me the under on Rutgers.
My number 5 is Michigan State, win total at 5.5. I just, losing Peyton Thorne to Auburn it's a loss, but I think the bigger loss is Keon Coleman to Florida State. You're talking about a really good receiver. Michigan State, for whatever reason, has just not been able to find their groove on defense under Mel Tucker, who is supposed to be a really good defensive coach, but it's not been there. Even that year they won 10 games and Kenneth Walker had a really good season. The defense wasn't there. I just don't have faith in the offense to really pick up the slack if their defense doesn't improve. I think it's possible they can get to 6 wins because Central Michigan and Richmond should be wins. They're probably going to lose to Washington at home.
Yep.
Maryland's a toss-up, but I lean Maryland
on the road.
Yeah, at Iowa. Rutgers is probably a win. Michigan at Minnesota, Nebraska at Ohio State, at Indiana, and then they finish up with Penn State. I'm on the under here. It's just those top 3 teams. It's just I don't see them beating them at all. And then a road trip to Iowa. I don't know that they beat Minnesota either. So give me the under on Michigan State.
What's that over under set at right now?
5.5.
5.5.
Yeah. Can you get me 6?
Give me the under. I think the only 5 games I see them winning this year is Central Michigan, Richmond, Indiana, maybe Maryland, at Rutgers, and Nebraska. It's really a toss-up, though. It's going to be one of those things where you're hiding underneath a blanket. You're really not going to want to watch it. However, Mel Tucker is going to have to turn it around for them. They paid Mel Tucker for a reason. Whether that reason is Kenneth Walker or it's because they think Mel Tucker can really turn around that program. Either way, going bowling this year, I just don't see it happening, but also give me the under.
So for our first team, we're going to talk about the Big Ten East that actually has a positive win total that makes them seem like they're going to make a bowl game is Maryland at 7.5. Look, Talia is back. He reportedly got offered, I don't know if you saw the story, of $1.5 million from an SEC school. My first thoughts was Florida or Auburn, but that's a different discussion.
I was thinking Auburn from everything else.
But, this team has been on an upward trajectory under Mike Locksley, and me and you have talked about it a little bit. We want to see Maryland without divisions, which is coming next year in the Big Ten. So they don't have to play Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State every single year because they got talent. Now, they are losing a lot at the receiver position, but they should be 3-0 by the time they go to Michigan State, and they could be 5-0 by the time they play Ohio State. I mean, they open with Towson, Charlotte, Virginia, at Michigan State, and Indiana. They're going to lose to Ohio State, but they get Illinois, Northwestern. That those could be wins, and then that gets you 7, and then you got to beat Nebraska or Rutgers. I'm pretty I don't think they beat any of the top 3 teams, but every other game on that schedule to me is winnable. Slightly, I'll lean over, although I probably wouldn't bet it.
Yeah. As far as Maryland, I mean, I trust Talia. Got to show love to my Tonga Valoa boys. However, the only issue is I think 8-4 would be a stretch for them. I really do, but I do see them getting bona fide wins out of Townsend, Charlotte, Virginia, mm, probably Illinois if I had to bet right now, Indiana, Northwestern, and Rutgers. I see those being solid wins. If they could pull off a win against Nebraska and or Michigan State, I could see this being a pretty decent year for Maryland this year.
Yep. All right, it's big three time. I know you're gonna be different than me. I'll start the discussion with Ohio State at
Yeah.
number 3. Look, I've just got concerns about the quarterback situation, the offensive line. You lose 2 tackles like that, you lose your center as well like that, and the replacements in the offensive line, I don't know, have been I don't like them so far, to say
Yeah.
the least. And then on the defensive side of the ball, like they do have talent. Like Tommy Eichenberg's a good player. JT Tuimalau has really flashed a lot of times in games, and he won them that Penn State game last year. But there wasn't consistency when they played teams with a pulse last year. Like Michigan ran all over them. They couldn't stop Georgia. Penn State scored a little bit on them. Like when they play teams that they're just far superior in talent, then their defense was really good. But that's not going to be the case some of the time this season, I should say.
Yeah.
At Notre Dame's a tough game. Penn State at home and at Michigan. Like those are the seasons of those 3 games. They're going to win the other 9 games. Like don't worry about that. Like I'm not worried about them going to Wisconsin. It could be tough right after the Penn State game, but I just think they're a better team. The receiver room is stupid. Like it's just Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Ibuka,
Julian Fleming might pop out a little bit. Yeah.
Cornell Tate, Brandon Ennis. I mean, we just named 5 stars right there. So it's really crazy what they got. I think their secondary could be a little bit better, but to me, the front seven's the strength of that defense probably. It's a hot take, but I've got them finishing 3rd, and I've got them going 10-2. The win total is set at 10.5. I wouldn't bet it. I would lean under just because as I'll explain in a little bit, I think Penn State, Michigan are better teams.
I am right there with you. I think they end up 10-2. I think they do take losses to Michigan and Penn State. It's not so much that I think Penn State is more talented or that Michigan is more talented, but I trust what they have behind center a lot more because look, you can have a stable of wide receivers. You still got to have a quarterback that can get them the ball consistently to be able to make big plays. Ohio State, their defense has just been so it's lackluster. Like you got a very talented roster, but I don't think their defense has been as good as it should be in recent years. And I think that's going to hold them back whenever you have an experienced quarterback at Michigan and then Drew Allar. I think his talent level can overcome a lot of what Ohio State will throw at him. Give me 10-2. I'm gonna go ahead and say one of our other topics right here. I do think Ohio State might be the most overrated team in the conference. Not to say they won't be good, not to say they don't have one of the top 5 rosters in the country. I just don't think they're gonna be able to get the production they've had in recent years with quarterbacks like Justin Fields and CJ Stroud.
Yeah. And I guess that leads us to Michigan, who I've got finishing as the Big Ten East runner-up. I got them going 11-1 with their only loss being on the road to Penn State. It's hard to find holes in this team. I mean, J.J. McCarthy, if he takes a step up, could be a really, really good player. Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, you got to hope Blake Corum comes back and, is the same Blake Corum. They're easing into the season. Like their schedule until they have to go play at Penn State November 11th, they're going to be like almost 3 touchdown favorites in nearly every game they play. So it's not like they need him right away. Their receivers, I think they need to be more explosive in the passing game. But not that they were bad last year, but like you saw in the TCU game, they could have just used some more big plays.
Yeah.
But defensively, I think they're going to be solid all around, despite they lost a couple of guys. I just know what I'm going to get out of Michigan. I think this is going to be Jim Harbaugh's best Michigan team. I think they're only going to lose 1 game. It's hard for me to say much. Give them a lot more higher praise than that.
I do have Michigan winning the Big Ten this year. That is probably the only place we defer in this order of finish. However, would you go as far to say that Michigan probably has the most amount of questions out of any of the top tier programs in the country?
Sure.
I'm confident. Like in their running game, I'm confident. Now they got a quarterback that totally believes in them. There is no 2-quarterback system to start the season anymore. I trust their defense. They got ball players all over that defense, and especially in that secondary. I like the Michigan to win, but let's go ahead and move on to Penn State. I have Penn State finishing at number 2. I think their only loss this year might just be Michigan. It's going to be a gauntlet. Like you said, a lot of things could happen. It could be a three-way tie, but I'll go as far and go ahead and touch on one of our other segments. My bold prediction, I got Penn State only having one loss on the season this year. I don't think they win the conference. However, I still think they make the playoff. I think they are that good. This is by far James Franklin's most talented roster. You got the running back. I believe you got the quarterback. Oh, and by golly, do you have the defense? You got NFL players running all over that defense on the defensive line, then the back end of that front seven, and also in the back end of that secondary. You got one of the best corners in the country. You got one of the best defensive linemen in the country. I think that defense will be very, very good. But I do think because I have the least amount of questions about Michigan, I got to put Penn State at number 2.
Yeah, I mean, I've been talking about Penn State for a while. People might think I'm a Penn State fan at this point, but I think Drew Allar has elite traits. I think he could be very, very good.
Yeah.
Dynamic running back duo. Slight concern, like losing Mitchell Tinsley and Parker Washington. Like, don't sneeze at that. Those were good receivers. Their offensive line, I think, is the best in the Big Ten. I think it's better than Michigan's, and I think that edge on the offensive line and that quarterback is what puts them over Ohio State for me. Like, and I think their defense, I think their pass rush, and I think their secondary is better than Michigan's. Like Chop Robinson, Kalen King, like those guys on defense, like the linebackers are really good too. If I have a slight concern, it's the defensive tackle area. Like I think they're a little light in that area, and facing a team like Michigan that's just going to pound the rock at them, I think that could be a little problematic.
Yep.
It's do or die. Like this is James Franklin's a very good coach. He has just not been able to get to the playoffs.
Got to get over the hump.
He's the only flaw. Like he's beaten Michigan and Ohio State before. He just hasn't done it in the same season, and he hasn't done it when it's probably truly mattered. I think this is the year he gets it done. I think Penn State runs the table. I think they beat Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. And to transition into bold predictions, I talked about in one of our previous episodes the SEC getting 2 teams in. I think the Big Ten gets 2 teams in as well. I think, like, just revealing my playoff already, I think Penn State and Michigan get in too. Like, I think Michigan should be concerned a little bit if they lose a game because their non-conference schedule isn't the strongest by any means, but a win over Ohio State will get them in. But my bold prediction is I think the Big Ten will get 2 teams in this year.
My bold prediction, I've kind of already said it. I think Penn State is a one-loss non-conference champion. I still think they make the playoff. I'm with you. I think the Big Ten has the best chance of putting multiple teams in this playoff. Let me ask you this. What are the odds that there are 2 conferences with 2 different teams in this playoff? Because you got to think, Georgia and Alabama, maybe even Georgia and LSU. Georgia has a little bit of a lackluster schedule, but I expect them to be there in the playoff. Clemson and Florida State, it could come down to one of those 2. Their only losses might be to each other at that point. I think you got Texas out in the Big 12 and the Pac-12, well, Pac-11, probably more Pac-9 now. You got USC, but do you trust their defense enough to make that happen? I don't trust Oregon and Washington to make the playoff, but more or less, I think the Big Ten has the best chance.
Yeah, that's I've got them. My playoff: LSU, Georgia, Penn State, Michigan. We'll have a playoff episode later on.
Crazy, man.
Yeah, I just trust those teams a lot. And like Ohio, Penn State, Michigan, like I know people, they like to put Penn State just 9th or 10th in the country. They'll go 10-2, easy losses to Michigan and Ohio State. I'm just telling you, people are overlooking that and just oversimplifying it. We're a little rapid fire right here. I think we both have the same offensive player of the year. It's Marvin Harrison Jr.
Marvin Harrison Jr. He's a kid that you create on Madden. I mean, he's got the size, the speed, the hands, the catch radius. Arguably the best offense player in the country, for being honest.
I don't need to say much more than that. Defensive player of the year, I'm going Chop Robinson at Penn State. Okay. I think he is going to lead the conference in sacks. I think he is going to have a fantastic season on the best defense in the Big Ten and one of the 5 best defenses in the country.
Yep.
I don't need to say much else.
Give me Jerzon Newton out of Illinois. Okay. I think he can be a guy like Jared Verse is at Florida State. I think he can make a lot of shake. If that defense is going to win Illinois a lot of games, I think it starts with him.
Yep, I love that pick. He could be a first-round pick in the NFL.
Very much so.
Good. Coach of the year, I think it's self-explanatory at this point. I think it's James Franklin. I think this is the team he has been building towards since 2017 when that was his last really, really, really good team. I thought they could have made the playoff that year. But this is his best all-around team. There's not a whole lot of weaknesses you can point to. If he's going to take – and, Ohio State's going through some transition on the offensive side of the ball. it's time, James Franklin. Show us what you got.
I agree with you. I got James Franklin as well. I'm ready to see this brother get over the hump. I think he has the roster to be able to do that this year.
That's going to wrap it up for our Big Ten preview. We've done 3 conferences now. Started with the SEC, did our ACC preview last week. Big Ten tonight. Go check those episodes out as well. Be sure to like and subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. Make sure to download us, like and subscribe. Give us a 5-star rating if you could over wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it's Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Go like and subscribe. We would appreciate it. Follow us on Twitter. Follow Coby on Twitter. His high school football season's coming up. It's going to be fun to follow that. I've got Georgia Tech covered for you over at allyellowjackets.com. Be sure to hit that follow button down there. But Coby, any last thoughts before we get out of here?
Hey, listen, Big Ten preview is up and over with. I think the Big Ten might be the best conference in the country this year.
Saying that where we're from, that's not allowed.
Hey, listen, I'm a Bama fan. I got faith in Georgia. I think LSU could be good, but listen, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan as a collective, that's tough to beat.
And then there's Iowa. So that makes it a big 4. Yeah. So, that's us in the Big Ten. But appreciate everybody listening and following along tonight. That is Coby Reed. I'm Jack